So week one of college football is now in the books. There were games every day from Thursday to Monday. It was a great weekend full of some incredible games, some incredible scenes. I think we can all agree that it was amazing having college football back. And I just feel like week one was eventful enough for me to talk about it a little bit, just a little bit. So the first thing I want to get out of the way is exactly what I just said, how great it is to have college football back. Because, yes, we had college football last year, but college football is a sport powered by, fans and passion and traditions and stuff like that. And we were robbed of so many of those things last year. So this weekend, seeing all those packed stadiums, the bands back in the stands, everyone cheering on their teams, the traditions like Enter Sandman at Lane Stadium or the jump around at Camp Randall. Just it's so great to see all those things back, and I think that's the most important thing about college football being back is that it's not just the sport returning, it's everything that comes with it now normally returning, and I love seeing that. But in terms of the actual games themselves, there are a few I wanted to touch on in particular, a few games, a few teams that I wanted to touch on in particular. Starting with the first really big game this weekend, which was Ohio State against Minnesota. On Thursday night, Minnesota was giving Ohio State fits for a while, but the second half, the Bucs pulled away for a 45-31 win. I think the biggest story in this game was the struggles of C.J. Stroud early. I did think that he was going to struggle a little bit, maybe not to the extent that he did, because for a second he looked like he couldn't even complete a pass. But he ended up figuring it out in the second half, largely because Ohio State's offensive talent is just that good. He can always bank on Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and other guys to make plays. The offensive line was doing their job, tremendously. The running game was awesome. The running backs were awesome. Mine Williams did his thing, redshirt freshman, and true freshman Travion Henderson burst onto the scene in a massive way with that 70-yard touchdown catch and run. So even though C.J. Stroud struggled a little bit, I just don't think those struggles will persist. Again, it was his first start. The kid's 19 years old. He had never thrown a collegiate pass before. He had never played meaningful snaps before. It was a really tough environment. It only gets harder from here, but I'm giving him a pass for struggling just a little bit in his first ever real game. But Ohio State, the story of the game, their offensive talent was great, but their defense was a little suspect. Defensive coordinator Kerry Combs just insists on playing this basic cover one, and it doesn't work because Ohio State's corners aren't good enough, to break up passes or force, coverage sacks or something like that. And the defensive line isn't getting to the quarterback as much as they should be. Now they did, force a strip sack, fumble, return, touchdown on Thursday night, but anyone who watched the game would tell you that Ohio State, their defense just was not there for the most part. And so maybe stop playing that cover one and see what happens. I don't know. We'll see. But Ohio State, they got the job done on Thursday night. On Friday night, Virginia Tech pulled off the upset of North Carolina in a really inspired performance by the Hokies. I was really shocked because when I was previewing it, I said, I don't believe in the whole Justin Fuente thing at Virginia Tech. It's one of the reasons I picked UNC to win the game, but I got to give Fuente props. He had a great game plan. They shut down Sam Howell in that UNC offense, making Sam Howell look a little bit funny in the light, actually. It was an incredible environment, like I said before, with the whole Enter Sandman thing. Lane Stadium was packed to a capacity. I haven't seen it that packed in a very long time. Sam Howell was, just in hell all game long, threw 3 interceptions. Some of them were really bad interceptions, but also Virginia Tech did their job, not just defensively, but offensively. Braxton Burmeister for a guy who hasn't had the greatest collegiate career up until this point. Looked really good, both throwing the ball and running the ball. He had a pretty bad interception, but other than that, I was pleasantly surprised with Virginia Tech on all fronts. They are now ranked in the AP poll, I believe, 20th, and they deserve that ranking. UNC plummeting all the way from 10 to 24 this week. So UNC just isn't what we thought they would be. Maybe it's a Mac Brown thing. Maybe it's the fact that they lost 4 of their best offensive players to the NFL this year. I don't know, but I think UNC just doesn't have it this year in the Coastal, and that's not their problem. But I think the most interesting takeaway from this game is, can Virginia Tech play this well the entire season? Because if they do, in a very weak Coastal, this team can definitely make it to Charlotte in December. So very interested to see how the season goes for Virginia Tech. On Saturday, one of the premier games going into the week, and then actually on Saturday, was Penn State, Wisconsin. This was a grueling, low-scoring, smash-mouth Big Ten football game, just like I thought it would be, but it was even more than I thought it would be. With Penn State pulling the road upset 16-10. The story of this game was Penn State's defense, which just really, really shocked me with how well they played. Now, Wisconsin's defense played a hell of a game too, but Penn State just made a lot more plays when it mattered, both offensively and defensively. Jahan Dotson had a great game. There were so many blown coverages from Wisconsin. I don't know how it kept happening consistently. And Sean Clifford isn't a very good quarterback, but he made the throws he needed to make when he needed to make them. But Penn State won this game because of Wisconsin's ineptitude in the red zone, especially thanks to Graham Mertz, who, like I said, is a turnover machine, and I thought maybe he could figure it out and fix those issues, because I feel like it's a coachable issue. But 2 turnovers in the red zone, one on a fumbled exchange and the other one on an interception, which was a really good play by the Penn State defender, but the interception jumping the route at like the 5-yard line to essentially seal the game with about 2 minutes left for Penn State. But Penn State proved me wrong. They looked pretty good defensively. They looked decent offensively. And, the Big Ten East is extremely weak this year. The toughest opponent they'll play in the Big Ten East is Ohio State, obviously. But I'm very interested to see where Penn State's season goes from here. I think, and Wisconsin will bounce back, I'm sure, but the Big Ten West is a lot tougher than the Big Ten East is, so it could be an uphill battle for Wisconsin. We'll see how it all plays out, but I think they have a Graham Mertz problem, because the offensive line was doing their job, their defense was spectacular, their running back Ches Malusi put on a masterclass of a performance. They lost that game simply because of Graham Mertz. So where do they go from here? I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, Penn State, pleasantly surprised. Another game that was happening at the same time was Oklahoma-Tulane, and I just don't know how Oklahoma struggled in this game so much. Yes, I know they pulled away, and then Tulane almost came back. I don't care. You cannot be finding yourself in that position if you're Oklahoma. The game literally got moved to Norman because of the hurricane, and you still struggled that much. I think it's inexcusable. Spencer Rattler, while he looked good at times, looked pretty bad at other times. It was, on the whole, I'd say a pretty mediocre performance. He did not look like a guy who's ready for, a Heisman campaign like I said he would be. Spencer Rattler was my Heisman pick, and I don't want to take that back, because for one, I can't, but also, I don't know, I just don't like the way he looked. I don't like the way Oklahoma looked as a whole. Every year I hear the same thing. Oh, this is the year Oklahoma figures out their defensive issues. They have this many returning starters. They have this much incoming talent. This is the year they're going to have a good defense. And then they go and give up 35 to Tulane. They won the game on a 4th and 13 that the Tulane quarterback almost ran for the first down. He was a yard short, maybe less. And I want to give credit to Tulane for sticking in this game. But this is a team that was picked to finish 7th in their conference, that just took Oklahoma to the brim. So Oklahoma maybe not as good as we thought. I mean, again, it's really too early to make these decisions and to jump to any conclusions. But like, they jumped from 2 to 4 behind Georgia and Ohio State in this week's AP poll, and I wholeheartedly agree. I'll get into my own top 10 later, but yeah, Oklahoma really head-scratching struggles. A team that seemingly never struggles in any regard, however, is the Alabama Crimson Tide, and right now, let me be the first to say I'm sorry. I apologize. Alabama, Nick Saban, Bryce Young, everyone involved, I apologize. I said Alabama was the 5th best team in the country, and I was wrong. That was a big miss on my part. I'm not sure what I missed. I'm not sure. I can't even remember what the thought process was, because Alabama was just that freaking good on Saturday in Atlanta against Miami. Listen, there isn't a single area that this team is even remotely bad at. They are incredible at everything. Even their defense, which is, albeit a little suspect, looked spectacular. I don't know if it's Miami being that bad. It could be. I don't think so, though. I think Alabama has this thing figured out. They are the clear-cut #1 team in the country. And again, I'm sorry I ever suggested otherwise, because that was complete heresy. But Bryce Young, his first start, he didn't have to do too much, but he made the plays he needed to make when it mattered most. That 94-yard touchdown pass, he delivered it on the money to Jameson Williams, the transfer from Ohio State, and he took it the distance. That was elite SEC speed, as they like to say. The rest of the offense was awesome. The defense was awesome. It was just a complete masterclass of a performance, and based on the way a lot of other teams in the top 5, top 10 played this week, it's hard to see anybody who can slow down Alabama. And they only have really one tough game on their schedule, which is going to Kyle Field and taking on Texas A&M in about a month. They also play Florida in week 3, but I mean, it's Florida. I don't really. They're a good team, but they're not Alabama. I think A&M is the closest thing to Bama, not necessarily on a program or talent level, but they're the second best team in the SEC West. I feel like that was an important clarification. So, Bama, they're great. They're amazing. They're awesome. I don't know what you want me to say. They're the #1 team in the country, and I'm really, again, sorry I ever suggested otherwise. But before I get into more of the SEC, I want to give a quick shout out to another team I doubted, which was the Iowa Hawkeyes. They just laid the smackdown on Indiana, a team I thought was going to win that game, a team I came on here and said was going to win that game. They destroyed them. It was not close. They looked incredible, and in 2 major facets that really stuck out to me. One of them was the running game. Like I said, I gave my shouts out to Tyler Goodson. He's one of my favorite running backs, not just in the Big Ten, but in the country. I just love his game. And the other one was the defense, because Indiana's offense is not to be meddled with. Again, like I told you, Michael Penix and those receivers, that offense is a very, very good unit that returned almost all of its talent. And Michael Penix couldn't do a thing against the Iowa defense. The defensive line was getting after him. The secondary was suffocating him. He threw 2 pick sixes. I mean, if Iowa can play this well on both sides of the ball, they can win the Big Ten West. They can do it with their eyes closed. Personally, I think they're currently the best team in the Big Ten West. I picked Wisconsin to win it, but based on what I saw from Iowa yesterday, or not yesterday, but on Saturday, and based on what I saw from Wisconsin, Iowa's the clear-cut better team. And I'm going to have my eye on them in every game moving forward. Obviously, there's a big one next week, but I'll get into that later. And then obviously, Georgia Clemson. Did it live up to the hype? Depends on who you ask. I thought it was a good game, and I very much enjoyed the outcome with Georgia winning the game 10-3, contrary to what I predicted. But you have to look at 3 big things in this game. Number 1 for me is the Georgia defense, because holy crap, that was insane. They sacked DJ Uiagalelei like 7 times. It was a complete mismatch in the trenches. Clemson ran for only 2 yards the entire game. They got a pick 6 that was the defining moment of the game. They looked incredible in the secondary. They looked incredible in the front seven. Their defensive line was dominating the offensive line. Their linebackers were getting after the ball. That was some of the fastest linebacker play I've ever seen. This Georgia defense is the real deal, and it will win them the majority of their games this year, if not all of their games. Much like Alabama, rather, it's not a very difficult SEC schedule, but these two teams are very likely going to meet each other in Atlanta, both at 12-0, probably in a 1v2 matchup. And I just want to fast forward to that right now. Now, granted, I told you I don't trust Georgia in big moments, so I don't know how much I trust them to get to Atlanta at 12-0, but this team is incredible, at least defensively, and that leads me into the second thing I wanted to talk about, which is Georgia's offense. Everyone loves JT Daniels. I never really saw it, but I thought maybe, this is his second year at Georgia. Maybe he'll get it together and he'll look good. JT Daniels played bad. I don't even want to say he was alright or average. It was a bad game for him, and I don't know what the excuse is, because Clemson's defense, while good, isn't amazing. I think the Clemson defense played a good game. I thought a couple standouts were Miles Murphy, the defensive end, and Andrew Booth, who could be the top cornerback in this draft, honestly. A lot of people love Derek Stingley. He didn't have himself too much of a fun time against UCLA, but Clemson's defense, while they played a good game, it's I felt like Georgia at least had the offensive talent to move the ball down the field, but they really couldn't. But JT Daniels, I don't know if I can put my faith in him to win a big game. I don't know how many quarterbacks there are in the country that I can put my faith in, but JT Daniels certainly isn't one of them. So the third thing I want to talk about was Clemson's offense, because that was really embarrassing. They ran the ball 9 times for a net of 2 yards. Their offensive line looked like they didn't even want to be there. DJ Uiagalelei, while yes, there was pressure in his face every 5 seconds, also didn't look very good in his first, real. I mean, it was his third start, but it's the first time he's the full-time starter at Clemson. He didn't look good at all. The running game was non-existent. The biggest problem was the offensive line, because the wide receivers did their job. Joseph Nada had himself a nice game. I think it was 6 catches for 110 yards. But this team didn't even get in the end zone. They scored 3 points the whole game. They had a 0 on the scoreboard for most of the game. And they didn't look good in any aspect of the offense outside of a good game from Joseph Nada. So where does Clemson go from here? I don't know. I think they've fallen off a cliff. As of right now, I do still think this is a playoff team, because they won't lose another one of their games because they play in the ACC. But now the margin for error is non-existent. If they lose a single game, the season is over. And even if they win out, they have to hope that Georgia or Ohio State or Clemson or A&M or somebody slips up. I don't know if Clemson controls their destiny any longer, because I think that Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State are that strong. So we'll see. I think at the end of the season, we'll be talking about a potential, who gets in, Clemson or Oklahoma type of thing. Maybe A&M has an argument. Maybe Cincinnati has an argument. Again, it's too early to tell, but I thought Clemson laid the biggest dud of week 1 for a team of their caliber. So I'm sure I'll be talking a lot more about them in the future. Another team I wanted to give a quick shout out to was UCLA. I did bring up their game against LSU, but I only talked about LSU because I thought, LSU was the better team. But I did think UCLA was going to win the game, which they did. And man, UCLA is now 2-0. They're up to number 16, I think, in the AP poll. They are the real deal, and I picked them to win the Pac-12 South for a reason, but based on the way Oregon looked this week, which I'll also get into in a second, this team could very much win the Pac-12. Oregon and UCLA, in my opinion, are the two hopes for the playoff for the Pac-12, but I didn't think UCLA was in that conversation until this week. They laid the smackdown on LSU. They absolutely dominated in the trenches. The offensive line of UCLA was doing incredible work. I think their offensive talent is great. I love what Chip Kelly is doing there. I think they've got it figured out, and just look out for UCLA is all I'm going to say. And then Sunday night was maybe the game of the week, which was Notre Dame and Florida State. Now, I don't want to talk about this too much, but, you know, obviously Florida State was down 18 in the fourth quarter, came back to tie the game to force overtime. Obviously, the biggest story was Mackenzie Milton returning to the football field 3 years removed from that terrible knee injury at UCF. He came in because Jordan Travis lost his helmet for a play, so Milton had to come in, but it really sparked the offense and kind of sparked the latter half of the comeback. And Florida State ended up losing in overtime because their kicker missed the field goal, and Notre Dame's kicker didn't. Also partially because Mike Norvell maybe iced his own kicker. I don't know. But Notre Dame escaped Tallahassee with a W, despite Brian Kelly insinuating that all of his players should be executed. Again, there isn't a lot to talk about with this game, but it was... I mean, there's plenty to talk about this game, but there's not a lot that I want to talk about, but it was a great game. I thought Jack Cohn was great for Notre Dame. I thought Florida State really blew me away. I didn't think this game would be remotely close, but whether between Jordan Travis and Mackenzie Milton at quarterback, the offense looked really, really good. Ja'Shawn Corbin, the running back, had a great game. And their defense, honestly, didn't play terrible. Like, they made some plays. Jermaine Johnson is a transfer from Georgia, who I thought was incredible off the defensive end for Florida State. So who knows? Maybe this won't be a terrible year for FSU. Maybe they make a bowl game. Who knows? We'll see. But I think that's my biggest takeaway. It's not Notre Dame struggles, because they were fine. Jack Cohn threw for 366 yards and 4 touchdowns. They're going to be fine. I thought the biggest takeaway from this game was how much I was impressed by Florida State. And I think maybe this is the year that they finally get back on track. Who knows? We'll see. So those were the biggest parts of the weekend in terms of games or teams. There are 3 teams I wanted to shout out for the wrong reasons. Those are Iowa State, Oregon, and Washington. To you 3 schools, what the heck are you doing? Iowa State was in a dogfight with Northern Iowa, an FCS team, for the entire game. They escaped with a win. How they're favored this week over Iowa is an enigma to me, but whatever. Oregon also struggled. Granted, Fresno State's a better team than Northern Iowa, but at home, a 20.5-point favorite. I mean, like, they were losing that game in the fourth quarter. They needed to come back on their own turf to win that game. Didn't like what I saw from Oregon. I was very disappointed, and I'm very disappointed in Anthony Brown, who I thought was going to be the guy at quarterback, but now nobody in the Oregon fan base thinks that anymore. Nobody in the country, really. And then Washington obviously lost to FCS school, Montana. I can't explain it. I don't get it. I know UW hasn't been on the highest or best trajectory as of late, but I mean, like, that's genuinely embarrassing. So not even going to waste any more time talking about UW. And then I wanted to just quickly give my top 10 heading into next week. But before I do that, I have to bring up something that was the darkest cloud over college football in so many games this weekend, as somebody revs by. And that's the targeting rule. Now, the targeting rule has always been a strange part of the game, but I feel like many times, the referees, they get it right, it's warranted, where if you go by the books, then yeah, there's a targeting, and yada, yada, yada. And I know a lot of people have had a problem with the ejection part of it, but again, sometimes it's warranted. It's really strange. But this week, almost everyone was in agreement that so many of the targeting calls, of which there were plenty, like almost too many, were just ridiculous. There were a couple actually in Ohio State, Minnesota. There was one in Penn State, Wisconsin. There was a million of them just last night between Ole Miss and Louisville, and almost all of them were just heinous. I mean, they were genuinely heinous. Somebody got ejected last night in the Ole Miss Louisville game for simply making a tackle. The fact that, and it was one of those cases that they went back and reviewed it for targeting and then stuck on the targeting. I personally could not believe that. I mean, there are so many cases. Now, again, also last night in that Ole Miss game, Matt Corral, was running. He went down for a slide, and two guys came and popped him. One of them hit him on the helmet. You could have thrown either of those guys out for targeting. That would have been fine. That's a situation that warrants both the targeting call, the penalty itself, and an ejection. And even if you have like a borderline targeting hit by the books in terms of leading with the crown of the helmet or helmet-to-helmet contact, then you can throw a flag. But if a guy is not headhunting or something like that, if he's not actually targeting, let's call it what it is, if he's not actually targeting, he does not deserve to be thrown out of the game. These are kids. Joe Klatt said it best on Fox during the Penn State game. These are kids playing a fast game that's violent. They're just doing their jobs. And you're making their jobs impossible because you're telling these kids to not play defense. You're telling them to not make tackles, the way that they have to. Anyone who's ever played football knows that you have to, make a tackle bending down, wrapping around, and if you're a millisecond or a millimeter off or in this direction or in that direction, or if the ball carrier is ducking his head or something like that, then naturally there's going to be some sort of contact, whether it's helmet to helmet or something like that, where a guy gets popped. That doesn't necessarily make it targeting. That's just the guy who's doing his job. Now, I don't know what can be done at the highest level because I don't know who makes these decisions. I don't know what goes into them, but there has to be a change. You have to base, the intent of the hit has to be taken into account. You can't just throw a guy out because of the targeting call. If there's a helmet to helmet, collision, cool, tack on the 15 yards, but don't throw the kid out of the game. Ellis Brooks got thrown out of Penn State, Wisconsin, just for making a tackle. I mean, Graham Mertz leaned into it, and there just happened to be a helmet collision. The guy is not aiming for Graham Mertz's head. He's not saying, I want to go and give that quarterback a concussion. He's literally just doing his job and making a tackle. He does not deserve to be thrown out of the game for that, not in any regard ever. So, measure intent. If there's no malicious intent, 15 yards, get on with it. Do not throw him out of the game. And if it's in the second half, do not suspend him for the first half of the next game. That is absolutely ridiculous. The flags are getting thrown way too much. The decision-making has been terrible. It's honestly been disgraceful for the sport. And the rule itself needs to be fundamentally changed. It needs to be... The fact that it's gone this long without them even taking a look at it and thinking maybe we can change this or that is kind of ridiculous to me. And it needs to be changed for the better of the sport because these kids are just doing their job. They're doing what you want them to do. We're not playing flag football here, okay? Something needs to be done. The rule needs to be fundamentally changed. Otherwise, you're going to make people lose interest in playing or watching. Because they're going to say, if I'm a linebacker, they're just going to say, I can't make a tackle. Or something like that. And it's very, very bad for the sport. I hope it gets looked at soon. And if not, I hope somebody tells these referees, like, hey, calm down. Get out of my face. You can say, hey, calm down. Just let the kids play a little bit. It gets on my nerves quite a lot. It's my least favorite rule in my favorite sport, and so I'd like to see it tweaked or revoked or something. Just reworked, not revoked, obviously, but just rework it, man. Get it right, okay? Don't wait to get it right. Just get it right. So now that little rant is out of the way, I'll just give a brief look at my top 10, which I tweeted, but I'll just get into each team a little bit. Number 1 is obviously Alabama. I don't think I need to explain that at all. Just go back and listen to what I said about their game against Miami. Number 2 is Georgia. They deserve it because they just beat Clemson. And while the game was only won by 7 points, it felt like a lot more. They just stuck it to the man. And it was not very close. Their defense is great. Their offense needs work, but this is the second best team in the country. Number 3 for me is Ohio State. They did enough to be able to jump up a little bit. At least in part because Oklahoma struggled a lot, and that's why I have them at 4. Again, you just can't struggle that much with Tulane and expect to stay in a top 2 position. Number 5 for me is Texas A&M. I really like Texas A&M. I think they have a good thing going. And I think no matter which way you look at it, because of Clemson's loss, these are the top 5 teams. You can rearrange them in any way you want, but I think a lot of people, especially a lot of AP voters from earlier today, are in agreement that these are the top 5 teams in the country. It's just that the order can be manipulated a little bit, but I don't think anybody is in doubt that Alabama and Georgia is the top 2. Number 6, I got Cincinnati. I just really like this team. I really like Luke Fickell. I really like Desmond Ridder. I like their chances in the American. I think that even if a couple teams stumble a little bit, I like their chances to be a Group of 5 playoff team. They have a wild schedule. They do play Notre Dame, and I believe they play Wisconsin. It could get pretty crazy for Cincinnati, but I think this is a very, very good team. And, if there's any team from the Group of 5 to make the playoff, it would be Cincinnati. And it's not Wisconsin, it's Indiana. So, sorry, I just had to fact check that real quick. They play Indiana and Notre Dame in the non-conference. Those are 2 big games that could potentially boost a playoff resume. I personally think they're a better team than Notre Dame right now. Again, I have Cincinnati at 6. My number 7 team is Notre Dame. They struggled a little bit with FSU, but again, it was a tough environment at Doak. I'm not going to give them any crap for it. They're still a very, very good team. Clemson finally clocks in at number 8. They laid the biggest dud of any team for me this week. I have to bump them all the way down to here. It's not an indictment on them being bad. It's just that they clearly have things they need to figure out and work on. I don't like their offense at all. But again, they play in the ACC. They don't play a team even a fraction of as good as Georgia for the rest of the season. So they'll be fine, and they'll probably still make the playoff. They've just got work to do to come back up. At number 9, I got the Iowa Hawkeyes. I absolutely loved what I saw from them against Indiana, and I don't think that there's a better team in the Big Ten West. I think this is easily the second best team in the Big Ten. I think Penn State might be a little bit behind them. I love their run game. I love their defense. It's Iowa football. It's Big Ten football. They do it better than almost anybody. And they're my number 9 team. And at number 10, I had a couple schools I wanted to maybe put in here. For me, it came down to Florida, Penn State, and Texas. Texas looked really good, but I still think they have some problems there. Penn State also looked really good, but I don't like their offense very much. So I stuck with Florida just to be conventional, because I know that they're a good team. They play in the SEC. It's all the bland reasons I can give. I could have thrown a dart at a wall, and it could have stuck on any one of these 3 teams, and I'd be fine with it. But I'm just going to stick with Florida for the time being. Teams like Iowa State and Oregon and, maybe other fringe top 10 schools. Again, I just thought Iowa State and Oregon looked really bad this weekend. It was a bad look for both of those schools, despite winning. And they play in the 2 biggest games next week, with Oregon going to Columbus to take on Ohio State, and Iowa State hosting Iowa in the battle for the Cy-Hawk Trophy. I like the 2 teams I have in my top 10 over those 2 teams. I like Ohio State over Oregon and Iowa over Iowa State. I think the fact that Iowa State's currently favored in that game is a little blasphemous, but yeah, it's going to be a little less of a star-studded week too, but those are the 2 best games. But I mean, yeah, Oregon, Kayvon Thibodeau got hurt this week. I don't know if he'll be playing in this game. If he's not, it's going to be a blowout, because there's no way Oregon will be able to rush the passer effectively enough or stop the run effectively enough, and the Ohio State offense will do more than enough to get the job done, even if their defense struggles a little bit. So I don't see Oregon really competing in that game. And then Iowa State, I just didn't like enough. I didn't like what I saw enough from them to pick them against Iowa. They looked really good. They have the momentum now. I think they can go on the road to Ames and get the job done. So that's just it for my reactions to week 1. I don't think many college football weeks will be as, content filled for me to be doing this, but this one was. So I did want to get it out of the way and did want to share my thoughts a little bit. especially on some of those teams, and then especially about the targeting thing, because it really gets on my nerves. But yeah, don't expect this on a weekly basis. But I wanted to do it now, and I'm glad I did. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed the games this weekend. I hope you enjoyed them. Sorry, this past weekend. I hope you enjoy them this upcoming weekend, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Links will be in the description to all of the the relevant places. Click all the buttons, the likes, the subscribes, the shares. Everything really helps and is appreciated. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.